in the introduction, if you could just say a few words about, the previous presentation from Antonella was wonderful because it's about livability, and the human context is important in this because what we feel and what we perceive may be very different from what we're told that we ought to be feeling, and how other people design it. So livability covers so many of the aspects about smart cities that make them human, because we have to inhabit them, and we have to share them with our neighbours and our fellow citizens. So if you could just say a few words about yourself, your company, and then your role in this smart city ecosystem, and perhaps conclude with a remark or two of your vision for livability.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. Frédéric Passaniti. I'm tech evangelist at Open Datasoft. So, let's say 2 sentences. Open Datasoft is providing a cloud-based solution for our customers to push, store, visualize, and share data. So, any kind of data. And the key here is to be able for our customers, so our customers are mainly cities, municipalities, metropolis, to be able to share the data easily, to make APIs of their data, and be able to allow citizens or startups or any companies to make new services on top of this data. So to create application or innovative services. And me, I'm have a technical hat, let's say. I'm working with our customers to advise them to use carefully, to use a nice little platform and to develop new services on top of the data. Let's say that. And my role in Smart City, help them to be to go for some innovation projects.
Okay, thank you. Tanya?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tanya. I work for the Carbon Trust, which, as I mentioned before, is a non-profit organization. So we're a non-profit consultancy organization, 180 people over 4 continents. We are mission-driven, so our mission is to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy. We work with businesses and public sector organizations worldwide to do that. I specifically come from the cities and regions team. So we work with cities and regions across the world. We are not technical people, so I'll leave all the technical questions to my compatriots up here. What we do is all the softer elements, so financing, stakeholder engagement, planning policy, science-based targets for businesses in particular, and anything pretty much to do with carbon reduction.
Okay, thank you. Charbel.
Hello, and thank you for not leaving. My name is Charbel, and I sit on the board of the Future Cities Catapult, which is a UK government-funded innovation center. The idea behind that is to bring businesses, SMEs, small, medium enterprise, academia, and specialists to solve the problems of cities. So obviously, we bring cities into the mix. The idea is start with the problem, understand what cities need, and then put the ecosystem in work to accelerate the creation, to de-risk the implementation, and to scale the deployment. We are a non-profit. Now, I have other hats. We're not going to talk about them. I'm here as a future city, but also I am part of the private sector, so a technology consultancy. I've been involved in smart cities since early 2007. And proud or not, in a way, to say I've done every possible mistake that you read about it. I started being a technologist. There's no shame in that, don't. I ended up being an urbanist, which is what interested me in this panel. I don't know if you want to talk about our vision. My view is the debate or the fight or the struggle or between technologist and urbanist has been since day one. We started by saying we could solve the problems of cities by using technology. Urbanists started by telling us, what do you know? Go back to your computers. The answer is somewhere in the middle at the end of the day. I'm not going to bore you to death, but the city is a computer. That's a vision. A city is a place of people, is the starting point. And I'm trying to say it's not an or. It can be an and. But let's start by the purpose. City is a settlement of human being. And Dr. Antonella said about that. If we start by the people, planners need to look at the ecosystem that has tools to solve the problems in the purpose of people. Does the city have to be without cars? No. Some cities want their streets without cars. Fine. My point is, the needs are different. Do we need to have driverless car everywhere? No. Some people want driverless car. Singapore is not the same as Northern Europe, right? They have different driving needs and priorities. The gentleman earlier was talking about Estonia. Hello. Sorry, I forgot your name. What was fascinating is someone asked you, how do you get the buy-in? We just told them, we mandate it. We cannot do that in the UK. And that doesn't mean one is right, one is wrong. It means you have to look at the context of where you are and work around it. Anyway, I'll stop here.
No, I think this is excellent, because what you're doing is you're framing some of the tensions that in fact are at the heart of what we're trying to wrestle with here. And these tensions, these incompatibilities are actually may be resolvable by finding a middle way, but they at the outset seem as if they are in conflict. But I wonder if I might draw a connection with what you were saying with understanding needs better back to data, because data is such a resource to which we now have access, and the power of data to reveal insights which can then guide choices, even while we take in other more subjective perspectives too. But data must be fundamental, surely, Frederick.
Yeah, in fact, I have an example. I think everyone tried it by coming to Lisbon. When I arrived by train from Porto, I just get my phone, started Google Map application, and just starting to make a plan to go from my apartment to my hotel. There is no magic behind this. If Google Map is able to compute a plan from a point to another one and propose you some public transportation, some metro transportation or buses or tramway or everything, there is no magic. They need the data. They need the data to provide the service to every citizen. So when I'm going, I came in Lisbon for the first time. When I arrived, I just started my usual application, and I saw that I was able to see which bus line I needed to take to just go to reach my destination. Of course, regarding Liveability, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure because I don't need to go to a bus station to look for a map like I used to do 10 years ago, for example. So the data is we are encouraging our customers, the cities, to share any kind of data, any kind of transportation data. Transportation topic is very easy to understand because it's the same. Another example, when you are going to work in the morning, you are checking your phone. If you have a service, an application that is able to tell you, okay, the usual metro line that you are using is just stop, there is an accident, anything, you are happy to know it before leaving and saying, okay, maybe I will take my bike, I will take a bus, something else. And you will anticipate. Just you don't need complex algorithm or complex systems that will compute and try. Just giving you the information, giving you the alert that something's wrong on your metro line. So it's pretty easy. But for this, transport actors, operators, need to share their data, need to open their data. So it's, very simple use cases to understand. But
which, in fact, TfL has done, for example, and they have explicitly said that they're not going to have their own applications, but they would rather enable a whole ecosystem of people using the raw data from their network. Livability is a key theme, and I keep coming back to this perception versus algorithm, and I think the gap between those will close, partly because the process is already underway, and partly because I've seen it in telecoms, going from MOS scores derived by people writing down a number to a computer calculating with an algorithm something which gives you a proxy of a MOS score. It works. So we will get there. But livability, how does that? There are different stakeholders here, aren't there? We're talking about needs of people who need to understand transportation, but there are logistics firms who have to do deliveries. There are people who live there. What other perspectives ought we to be considering? Have we captured them all in the discussions today, or have we missed something? I'm not asking you to recap every single presentation.
I was trying to go through my head if we've covered everything. I think one of the things that we skirted a bit over is the impact of human nature. I'm thinking particularly in terms of, well, I think best probably illustrated with an example. I was in dialogue with an urban planner from a large city in Southeast Asia, and he was expressing his deep-seated frustration because there's so much corruption in the local government that he was in that the solutions that were being implemented were not optimal from the people living in them. Now, there's a people perspective in all of the, I mean, it can be overt corruption, which is obviously an issue, but it can also be underlying that the people who make decisions have preferences that they impose. And I think that's true in pretty much every city, every region that we work in, that there is a risk that personal preferences or personal prejudices, they show themselves, and they don't have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be an unconscious bias. And it's particularly when it's an unconscious bias that it's incredibly difficult to counteract. And I think that human element has maybe been missed out a bit, but it's kind of key because you can use data to prove a lot of different points.
I can see how one could use data to capture a human element, but how might you? I think that's some way off. How can we start doing that now? Short of surveying people and asking questions.
Well, if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I think that I don't know that there is an answer to that question. My point was more that we need to be very aware that data can be manipulated to show a lot of opposing viewpoints, and is frequently used to show a lot of opposing viewpoints. Data is valuable, but we can't underestimate the impact of human nature. I mean, if you want to give another example, you can talk about zero carbon homes. You know, they've been engineered to be zero carbon, and most of the initial pilot cases showed that they were very far from being zero carbon homes because people weren't using them in the manner that they were designed to be used. And that was because part of the human element was engineered out of it. So this comes back to what you were saying, that it's not an either-or situation. It can't be strictly an engineering solution because we're dealing with human problems.
Okay, Charbel, please.
We are using the data, I think. So let's take a little bit U-turn, and I agree with the challenges. We'll come to them. But when we started in 2007, this story, we need to go back to where it came from. It came from real estate and industry, where technology company tried to take a service provider model and put it there by saying, if we can put connectivity in the infrastructure, we can start generating value-added services. We can create efficiency in how you operate your physical space. Physical space in that context was a building, a gated community, or a mini community, which is, we call it a city now. So, and the model worked because it was built on the promise that technology can generate value-added services to a niche customer. So this customer wants bigger, nicer, more expensive. So it's a marketing tool. When it worked, we said, aha, let's take it to cities, right? And cities, the first reaction was, we're not in the business of selling. We're in the business of servicing. So that's a big important. What I mean by that, as a business, you get to choose your client. As a city, you don't choose your citizen. Again, to narrow it down, I can focus on middle class, high income in the business, but in the city, to your point, a few of you made it, I have to incorporate everyone. I have to bring the rich, the poor, the educated, the non-educated, the old people, the young people, and so on. So that dynamic started teaching us things, and we started changing. Now, cities been receptive to two words, which you talked about, sensing and actuating. Everything you do in city is summarized by two words, whatever it is. Noise. You sense, you actuate, which means you detect something, someone complains about something, and you got to do something about it. Right? This is in their operational way, in the back office, people who manage the cities, these are the two words they understand. We can debate that, but the way they run their business is, oh, there is a leak, we write a report, we send inspectors, we dig, we fix. Now, technology offered sensing and actuation in a much simpler way. Well, let me rephrase. To us, maybe it's much simpler. To many of you, of course, it is. But to the cities, it's not like they don't get it. Of course they get it. They're not stupid people. They know what they're doing. They've been running the cities for hundreds of years before I was born. But the point is, we have something called defining reality in cities. We have budget, that's it, where we know every single line where it has to be spent. If we don't spend it, something will break. So we need new budget. Someone talked about capital. Talent. Well, I don't have people that talk about this. We usually outsource virus cleaning and emails to company. That's usually the outsourcing. Nobody, now cities building capabilities. And the most important one was at the end is, it's a change. And you touched on that. It's about changing behavior. It's about changing the way we operate. And that's the part that I think cities are struggling with. They have to change the way they run things with technology, and that's what we bring the disruption into. What is happening in the business, businesses are able to cope with, and those who are not are disappearing. Cities will survive, but they have to figure a way to deal with the disruption that technology is causing. But it's not going to be at the speed of companies.
Which some are embracing and others are catching up with. Okay, so I think what I will do now, if I may, take a few questions from the audience, which is always useful at this point. And then the title of the panel is, what do planners need to consider to satisfy all stakeholders? I think we've concluded you're not going to satisfy all stakeholders, but I would like to invite each of you, once we've commented on the questions, to say what would be number one in your list, and hopefully you all have a different answer, reflecting your different perspectives. Okay, but there's a question, I believe, I saw a hand go up. No?
Just, I guess it's more like a comment than a question, because of
observations are equally welcome.
Thank you. I'm of course totally in favor of technology as a way to investigate the city, as a way to sense the city. But I think it's important to stress the difference between a remote control-based system and a system based on an intimate sensing approach, as Douglas Portas said us many years ago. Thanks.
Absolutely, I don't disagree with you. I didn't mean to say that this is the dynamics. I'm talking about historically, this is how city operated. Now we have to accept the reality that citizens are not anymore passive users, they're active players. This is new to cities. Today, citizens are part of the decision process, because historically they used to be part of it via election or whatever kind of election, council, local, every 4 years, whatever the number of years, they express their frustration, but usually politicians tend to present their view, and then that's a mandate. Go figure out what you're going to govern on my behalf for 4 years. Today with social media, and I'll go back to sensing, this is my point, that's another way of sensing. That's a human mood. Right? It's the people mindset. So now this is a dynamic that is very new, and cities are learning to deal with that.
But my concern is that could produce a detachment from the real life. And my concern is that if we lose this kind of direct experience with places, it could be difficult to reclaim kind of quality, sonic quality and whatever you want, but quality of places where we live in. That's my concern.
I think that would be accepted by all. There's another question here, if we may.
Hi,
And I think in the interests of keeping things going, if you have subsidiary questions, then if we can sort of do them at the outset.
Can I ask a question now?
No, sorry, what I meant was, sometimes people have, a list of questions. If you have more than one question.
Just
okay.
one. And it's in a sense as much to you as to them about the title of this, about how to satisfy all stakeholders. And I'm wondering what the definition, how broadly you're viewing stakeholders. Because in the room today, I've seen a lot of people representing city infrastructure, outside experts, software, technology companies, vendors, people like that. And I'm just wondering if there isn't maybe kind of an untapped opportunity to involve corporations and commercial companies who are engaging with residents who are their consumers to further the cause that you're trying to do in developing smart products and packaging and using the technologies for their own retail and distribution strategies that further what the cities are trying to do, and what could be done to kind of make the city more livable.
That's a very
involving companies.
interesting question. Presumably you're thinking specifically of companies that are located within a given city as opposed to those which are operating across multiple cities, or are you including both? Okay, so fire away, panel.
I'll make it very quickly. Yes, I think the definition should include as wide as you can from the community and anyone that interacts with the community. And you touch on something that I'm not going to even, I agree with you, it's about the place, because cities are made of many places. Because you go to a city, you have downtown, you have the commercial area, you have the Chinatown, you have ethnic pockets. That's what makes a city. And who interacts with them is typically not technology companies and not government department. It's retail businesses, commercial entities, etc. And absolutely, they are in the mix.
Yes. Just while you're preparing yourself, I can give. There's a good example close to where I spend a lot of time, where a lot of the property is held in a commercial property estate, and they are very engaged. It's private, but they are in the freeholds to most of the land. Like there are quite a few of these in London, if you look them up. You know, single families who own hundreds of millions of pounds worth of property, and the two that I know in the area that I most frequently visit are really engaged with the community. And so they're a different kind of stakeholder altogether, but they are a commercial organisation. They don't act outside of that location, but within it they form very strong bonds with their tenants, their leaseholders, and in particular the shopkeepers to try and build a community. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Tanya.
No worries. No, I mean, I also agree. You should absolutely engage with corporations. I mean, if we're thinking about it within a mobility framework, for example, I mean, it'd be crazy not to include the car manufacturers, like the local distribution centers, when you're discussing the roads, different modal shifts that are happening. They need to be there because it's their industry as well. And I mean, not just from the sake of them being a corporation who has a commercial interest, but also as them being an employer of people who live in your city. So they need to have a voice, and they also will live in your city. So even as citizens, they will have a voice. But yes, absolutely include corporations in stakeholder engagement.
Frederick, do you want to add something before I bring it to a close?
Yeah, I think, okay, and on the opposite, corporation or big companies can also be part of the game of providing the data and sharing the data, because they are also part of the game of providing new services. And for example, when you have a Tesla car manufacturer, because you are talking about car manufacturer, when they are trying to install the maximum as possible of, you see, their supercharger, Tesla supercharger all around the territory, they are also providing all the information about all the positions, the kind of supercharger, the availability, all that stuff. So it's, again, sharing the position and being able to any citizen, again, or company to build an application to find and to have the list of all electrical car charging station. And so it's going to every direction. It's not only cities or municipalities that must share their data. So it's going in all the directions.
I think that was a wonderful question with which to close, and it reminds me of that historically certain large corporations have had immensely intimate connections with the cities they inhabit. Take Swindon with the railway manufacturers, Bourneville, a town created by the industry that fed it. Sunlight Soap, anyway, there's tons of examples all around Europe of cities which have these intimate connections with corporations. But in fact, I think you have answered for us this question. What do planners need to consider to satisfy all stakeholders? First, identify your stakeholders. And it seems very clear that there are many different ways of looking at it, and there is no right answer, because if we look in one direction, we will ignore something significant elsewhere, which should be represented or should have a voice. So anything to add, or shall we say thank you very much? And
just one thing, I think the spirit of the debate highlights that cities are ongoing social experiments that gets highly affected by the problems of the century, the decade, the era, and the technology of the era. So if you look around, the definition of smart city in India different from the definition in the Middle East, from Northern Europe, Southern Europe, USA. It's very different. But we have to look at stakeholder definition. I agree with, I mean, to me, it's very important, but people are changing. I consume city differently from younger generation, and definitely different from my parents. I am the in-between, but if you look at the new generation, now here I was walking, coming, and this great cathedral here, Belém. If you look at all the kids, all they're doing is taking photos and selfies behind, right? If you look at the old, just take a look now, the old people are admiring the walls, the statue, or reading a pamphlet in their hands. There is a fundamental shift in who we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I really would like to thank you for your forbearance, your commitment, and indeed the attention that you have provided to us all today. I won't provide any wrap-up remarks now. We can do that tomorrow. There are drinks, there are walks, there are all sorts of things, but please join me in thanking our panellists, and indeed give yourselves a big hand for your longevity.